You've never thought of yourself as particularly intelligent. Maybe you struggled in school. Maybe you weren't the fastest in the room. Maybe someone along the way, a teacher, a parent, a test, told you that you were average. And you believed them. But here's what those measurements missed. Intelligence is not a single thing. It's not a number on a page or a grade on a report card. The specific markers that science has identified as most reliably associated with genuine cognitive ability are almost never the ones that get measured in classrooms. They're behavioral. They're experiential. And for most genuinely intelligent people, they've spent their whole lives being told these markers were problems, not gifts. Today, we're going to change that. Here are 7 signs that you are more intelligent than you think. Sign 1, you talk to yourself. Not occasionally, regularly. Out loud or in your head, you narrate your experience, argue with yourself, think through problems by speaking them. Research published in the Quarterly Journal of Experimental Psychology found that people who talk to themselves while working through problems demonstrate significantly superior cognitive organization than those who don't. When you verbalize your thinking, you're not being absent-minded. You're using language as a tool to structure complex information, to slow down your processing enough to examine it clearly. The research shows that the people most likely to use this strategy spontaneously, without being taught, are the people with the strongest underlying processing ability. Sign 2, you stay up late. A study published in Psychology Today found a significant correlation between preference for staying up late and higher scores on general intelligence measures. The researchers theorized that nocturnal preference is, in evolutionary terms, a relatively novel behavior, departing from the standard human sleep pattern that most of our ancestors followed. And the ability and tendency to depart from evolutionarily standard patterns is associated with higher cognitive flexibility. Intelligent people's brains are more willing to override the ancient programming that tells every organism to sleep when it's dark. They stay up because something is happening in their mind that feels more compelling than sleep. Sign 3, you overthink everything. You've been told this is a problem, that you should just decide and move on, that you're making things harder than they need to be. A study from King's College London found that people who score higher on measures of verbal intelligence also tend to score higher on measures of excessive reflection, the tendency to analyze situations from multiple angles and continue processing after most people would have stopped. The overthinking brain is not a broken brain. It's a brain running more thorough simulations, more scenarios, more second and third and fourth order consequences. And while this can be exhausting, it is the cognitive signature of a mind capable of seeing complexity that simpler processing misses entirely. Sign 4. You're intensely curious about things that have no practical value. You've spent hours reading about something that will never help your career, your relationships, or your bank account. You fell down a rabbit hole at 2 a.m. about the history of something completely obscure. You find yourself genuinely fascinated by questions that most people have never thought to ask. Research from the University of Toronto found that intellectual curiosity, specifically the drive to explore ideas for their own sake without practical motivation, is one of the strongest predictors of general cognitive ability. The brain that wants to understand things it doesn't need to understand is a brain with excess cognitive capacity, processing power beyond what's required for daily function, searching for problems worthy of its engagement. Sign 5. You're highly self-critical. You notice your own mistakes more than other people notice theirs. You replay conversations and identify the better thing you should have said. You hold yourself to standards that feel impossible and feel genuinely troubled when you don't meet them. This pattern is closely linked to what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking, to observe yourself from the outside, to evaluate your own performance with something approaching objectivity.
Research consistently shows that metacognitive ability is one of the strongest correlates of general intelligence. Unintelligent people tend to overestimate their ability. Genuinely intelligent people tend to underestimate it. This is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you regularly feel like you're not as capable as others seem to think you are experiencing the intelligent side of that equation. Sign 6. You find it difficult to be around people who think superficially. Not because you're arrogant, not because you think you're better, but because shallow conversation feels physically uncomfortable. Because you need the conversation to go somewhere real, or it starts to feel like a waste of the only time you have. Research from the journal Intelligence found that people with higher cognitive ability report significantly lower satisfaction from social interactions that don't involve intellectual content. They don't enjoy socializing less across the board. They enjoy shallow socializing less specifically. And they enjoy deep, substantive, challenging conversation more than average. The need for intellectual stimulation in social settings is not antisocial. It's a symptom of a brain that requires a certain quality of engagement to feel genuinely alive in an interaction.
Sign 7. You feel like you don't fit anywhere. Not necessarily in a painful way, just in the quiet, persistent way of someone who has always felt slightly out of step with the standard frequency, who found the things everyone else got excited about vaguely confusing, who felt the gap between their inner world and the conversations available to them. Research on highly intelligent individuals consistently finds that the experience of not quite fitting is one of the most universal reported characteristics. Not because intelligent people are better, but because the distribution of cognitive ability means that the higher you are on that distribution, the fewer people there are who share your particular way of processing the world. The experience of not fitting isn't evidence of a defect. It's a statistical reality. There are simply fewer people operating at the same frequency. But here's what all 7 of these signs have in common. Every single one of them has probably been framed to you at some point as a problem. You talk too much to yourself, you stay up too late, you overthink, you're too curious, you're too self-critical, you're too selective about people. You don't fit in. And what the research is saying, clearly, consistently, across decades of cognitive science, is that every single one of these so-called problems is a marker, a behavioral signature of a mind that processes more deeply, more thoroughly, more completely than average. You were never the problem. You were the measurement instrument that the standard tests weren't designed to capture.
And the fact that you've spent years doubting your own intelligence, that's sign 8. Because the most intelligent people are almost always the last to believe it about themselves. Hit subscribe if this finally said something about you that you've needed to hear for a long time. And if you want to understand why the most intelligent people are also often the loneliest, that video is next. You already know you need to watch it.